Uh, Welcome back. Today I'm joined by Bellamy Aberdeen, and we're going to be looking at some of his wonderfully eldritch and strange collage creatures. So, would you like to say anything you'd like about those? Maybe something about the creation process.
Um, I could also, should I greet everyone first?
Yeah, you should greet everyone too.
Alright, hello everyone, I'm Bellamy Aberdeen, museum curator, ghost victim, occasionally an artist.
Hi,
I'm
it's
Nico.
Barb.
Oh my God!
Shush.
Shush.
With regards to the clearing of the...
I told you about that phone. Sorry, everyone. Sorry.
No worries, I cobble together images that I find into creatures and strange entities. My art form. I don't know if I want to go super in-depth on my creative process just yet, because I feel like front-loading that could be a lot, and I think it's a lot easier to explain with examples and the like on the screen.
All right.
But I make creatures out of cobbled images.
Oh my, that call scared the living daylights out of me. Well, now that I've corrected everything that got knocked out of the place by that, I think we should begin with the first image.
Sure thing. Let's start off with a more grounded composition than some of the other ones. So, here you go.
All right.
I won't tell you the name yet. I won't tell you sort of the inspiration yet, or like the design process. I just want to know, like, what your impression is.
So my first impression about this is, well, there's many parts from many different creatures, and it also has those two hands, which I think rotate. I like to imagine they rotate around its head, and so I kind of get to like, this definitely isn't something natural. I like imagine, maybe a sorcerer or something creating this, possibly as like a vessel for some divine being. Or something like that. Maybe that's what they. Because I kind of also get like the idea of it almost having a speaker like effect, to the flower head. Or maybe there's like, you look into it and it does some kind of visual effect. So either some audio effect or some visual effect. And because I think there's like a channeled spirit in there that is like, you cast it onto a corpse and like it slowly takes it over in this plant-like fashion while manifesting like hands in the air and stuff.
I think that's a pretty compelling interpretation, and you're very right about the sorceress connection, but this thing is actually just a creature that exists in nature. It's a territorial kind of, like, almost tiger or lion, not lions, because lions have prides, but a very, like, tiger or leopard type of predator in that. And regarding the hands, I wanted to sort of suggest a beast that could weave incantations in that. Because generally, if a creature doesn't have, say, opposable thumbs or a wizard robe or something along the lines, it's kind of a bit hard to depict it as a spellcaster. But for this thing, I wanted it to have the impression that these floating... You were right about the rotation suggestion as well. I wanted to have them in a... going the same direction to imply sort of a circular motion. But yeah, this is a chlorophytic skulker, which weaves fell incantations on forest invaders.
I see. The idea of it like doing the incantations with its hands, like, yeah, because he said it was natural, or is it like was it produced in some way? Because that I think implies like some human connection, like either like it is mirroring human hands, like it learned incantations from humans, is now using them, or it was created by humans in the far, far past, and they gave it hands so it could do incantations.
Okay. So the way that I've always conceptualized it is that in a similar fashion that both birds and bats evolved wings independently of one another, so too did gestures and hand sigils to weave incantations.
Ooh.
It's a thing where I forget if it's called divergent or convergent.
It's convergent, I believe.
Yeah. So that if this creature basically convergently evolved spellcasting, or so people think. The journal accounts, given how dangerous a creature like this is, are often sparse on the finer details due to the difficulty of studying a creature like this up close.
I see. And yeah, that lizard, is that a lizard tail or a plant-like growth?
It is a lizard tail. I picked it because I really, going into sort of the formal qualities of it, beyond just the conceptual, is that, because at the end of the day, a creature concept for me is only as strong as the creature design and the creature silhouette. So I like making my creatures both have an interesting concept to them and interesting sort of habits and behaviors suggested by their form, but I also want to make certain that the pieces fit together in an interesting way. So I saw the way that the pelvic bone sort of has this lovely, I call this a mouth component, in that it has sort of a curved concave surface that will swallow up the sort of the less clean cut parts of the collage component. And the way that I wanted to create a lovely kind of implied line, or not even an implied line, just to carry on the existent line of the spine, starting from the flower.
Yeah, I do like it, and I like what you said about the silhouette, because even though this is so, visually distinct, if you had this as just a silhouette, you'd be able to say, flower, hands, this like plant, this crown-like growth on its neck, this mane-like growth on its front, the skeletal body, and then like this weaving lizarding tail.
Mm-hmm. I wonder if I could try that right now. Hold on. Control A. Let me actually just see
if there's a levels function.
Yeah, I'm just gonna make it very dark. All right, so we're just gonna delete this for experiment's sake. Clear out the bits. A lot of open gaps in here. Oh, did I delete the rib on accident? Oops. Let's delete here, delete here, delete here. And let's put that silhouette theory to the test, because a thing that I love to do with the things that I make is I want to make every single creature I make, even if it is similar in terms of, being a quadruped or having reptilian attributes or having a very heavy botanical influence. Let's do colors, brightness. No brightness. Colors, brightness. Brightness, colors, brightness. And there we go. So you still have, again, you can see, like, I think the faintest hints of the details, but I like to create very distinct, and I like to focus a lot on making good and compelling compositions, because given how, in terms of like technical quality, there's only so much that you can really improve on with a collage. Like, you can make your cuts cleaner, you can be more meticulous about isolating things from their backgrounds, but generally speaking, your improvement in this art form comes in the form of just better image choice and better placement. So it's a very composition-heavy art form, which I'm a big fan of.
Yeah, I do remember in school when they had us do collages, it was always either primary colors or even just black and white. Probably because they were trying to build composition skills.
Yeah, because it's honestly, it's an art form that I'd recommend to anybody who aspires to just do any kind of visual art, because of how it encourages your composition choice. Because you can't create everything. You're fundamentally even if you create your own components and do kind of paper cutting, which sometimes I do for my collages, you're fundamentally restricted by the medium, and that you're using mixed media found images. But I think I forget whose quote it is, that through limitations we find true creativity, and I think that holds up for this art form.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I absolutely agree with that statement, because there's nothing more intimidating than a blank canvas. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think we should move on to, bestiary and stuff, like how you would represent this, you know, in more formal terms.
Okay.
So it's definitely got the spellcast aspect. So you're definitely gonna slap spellcasting onto this, spells and stuff. As for like the sizing of this, I actually think of this as like very small. Maybe it's because of the lizarding tail, but I think of it like probably as like the size of at least the body the size of a rabbit. You know, the head and stuff might go further than that. So I like to think like maybe it can shulk around in the forest, and you know, you won't really see it, especially because it's a it's a somatic caster. It's using its hands. It's not speaking at you. You're gonna get casted upon. You're not gonna realize it at first until you get the effects.
That's an interesting theory. No, this is not a small beast. This creature is I'm trying to think of. I think this would be. I forget how in D&D how large a medium creature is.
Medium creature. Just like that's the category with humans and everything like that. It's actually really hard to think of an animal that's represented in medium as D&D. I think even wolves are. No, wolves are definitely medium, but dogs are small.
Okay, so it's large. I think I would say that it's larger than a tiger. It's pretty sizable.
Oh, so that's like size large, like horses, tigers, that kind of thing.
Okay, yeah. This is a large creature.
My.
In that, because I want it to not only have, I mean, it has, of course, its spell casting, but it also has a pretty brutal pair of front claws.
Oh yeah, it can like it would be able to kick up with those, and especially because its trunk is plant, so it doesn't actually need to worry about that too much in terms of like motion.
Right. It's it's not a creature that would be instantly defeated by hitting it with a silence hex or anything like that.
Well, there goes that strategy out the window.
Yeah, this would be, I think, a solo ambush encounter. And that, like you said, you would get hit from an incantation from the trees, and then something horrific would happen to your bodily form, and then you recognize that you've been ambushed by this.
Now, this comes. Oftentimes, this is just not explained with magical creatures, but I always like to go into you know, of course, this creature fights like that, but how does it do the other stuff necessary for survival? You know, does it propagate more of itself? Are there a fixed number? Does it? Yeah, go ahead.
Questions like those are often ones that I don't necessarily seek out with answering with my designs, in that the world of these creatures is very much a surreal kind of shifting landscape sort of place, in that things aren't necessarily governed by the rules of fundamental sort of like the rules of life, as it were.
Mm-hmm. Well, I understand that much as a Call of Cthulhu keeper. No explaining the reproductive habits of Migo.
So I think I would describe it as they're not as incomprehensible as sort of a fifth dimensional being projecting down into our world, but they definitely have a lot more mystery and incomprehensibility than your average, even kind of unknown species on Earth.
Yeah, there's these things. It's not like you're going to be able to figure out a specific what is it? Well, they definitely have a behavioral pattern, but you're not going to be able to figure out like it's like tertiary stuff.
I think I would conceive of it in a similar way that I would kind of SCP anomalous objects, in which you can understand sort of the rules, the habits, the mechanisms with enough study, but where the anomaly comes from is almost impossible to find.
I get that much, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Alrighty.
But yeah, shall we move on to the next one?
I think so.
All right. Let's go for a deviation of form here. Actually, let's keep on the sort of plant beast motif with this one.
Ooh. So, yeah, that mouth is definitely the first striking feature you notice. And there's also that kind of well, it's probably not accurate to call it a maul, but what is it? I'm trying to think of like the specific term, like like when you have a lamplighter, those light fish, hooks or whatever, and other things that do that. But just like a kind of general tendril on its back, and it's also all on the body of this, bovine. So this is definitely, like the last one. This is probably a large creature, and I think that this one, it feels to me more directly intimidating. Not just because of the teeth. I imagine that this thing is going to run up to you and start mauling you, and it's probably going to use that long tendril on its back, like a grabber. So it's like a two-prong attack. That swings down quickly, and those tentacles come out, and they try to block you from the back while it bites at you with its teeth. And that large plant it might just be flavor, but I also might think like because the mouth is hollow enough, and I think that maybe what it does is it has like some other thing to collect things from the mouth, is that the mouth can extend and it pulls you out. It pulls you behind the kind of plant stuff. So this could even, if it just is staying still, it could even kind of camouflage into the surroundings, and then a big mouth comes out, chomp, and you get dragged down into the body, and you're already being pulled into it, and they're probably gonna have to try to feel for your legs behind this big canopy cover.
That's a very interesting theory on this creature. But I wonder if you'll find the actual explanation for its sort of habits and gimmicks more compelling than that even. So this. I wonder if when I tell you sort of what the tendril appendage is intended to suggest, what you'll think of it. But so the tendril is a banner.
Oh.
And that this is a creature called the Bellowing Rally Beast, in that it serves the function of kind of a tactician creature.
Oh.
In that it is always accompanied by smaller, lesser creatures that it will command to perform certain actions. Will bestow upon them blessings with the chime of its kind of bell banner appendage. And it has the ability to sort of force mutations onto creatures to make them, say, explode into a corrosive substance when defeated, or...
Ooh, I like that. I like that a lot. And I can actually, when you mentioned it, I definitely could see it in the mace, where it is like this holy thing, and so like now it's like, oh, the tentacles come out of that, and they're like and that's like maybe a way for it to establish connections, but also with creatures like directly, like very thin ones, maybe kind of if for telepathic communication, but also in the same way, if you said like mutations and stuff, like that mace is like its big. Maybe even its brain or whatever, or like another kind of nervous system where it has all this stuff it can do from it. And now that mouth, if you want something to scare the enemy, that mouth definitely works. Maybe in like kind of a crest piece, or
certainly. Because this one's actually paired. I did this and another in the same week. That sort of are meant to embody two different kind of sensory creatures. Now, this one's very much a sound-aligned creature in that it roars to shout commands, it buffs and benefits with its banner that chimes. Being that it's a tactical creature, it uses its giant maw to inflict, to attempt to dismember, to sort of restrict the options that a target might have in order to open up more strategies or account for strategies that it would rather not deal with. So this is one of the more intelligent creatures that you can encounter. I generally keep in mind that most of these creatures are worryingly intelligent, but this one is very much one that thinks in advance and wants to sort of maximize its safe options, basically.
Yeah. I mean, when you said thinking ahead, that also made me think of its, like, intentions. And you definitely said from the way that it mutates other creatures, I definitely think of this as a very, a selfish kind of solo creature that is taking other creatures and using them for its for its own goals. And I could even see like and I don't think it's like going to become big on the level of a society, but like I imagine like maybe that the quote unquote packs of these is like made up of a bunch of different like lone animals or whatever that it's taken, now uses it for itself, and maybe it impresses or fights with other of its species in that way too.
That's a behavior pattern I hadn't considered and is interesting, but I've generally thought of this one as it does have the healing capabilities, that it's seen as almost a benevolent sort of leader character, in that it comes up with strategies to ensure hunting and survival, because they do have a more tyrannical ruling creature that I've designed, which has very much more of those symbols of selfish kind of power and imperial authority. But
I mean, what made me also think of that with this, at least that this is like maybe a pride creature, is that it has that big mane, kind of a lion's like mane, where that definitely seems like it could be a thing of status, like a peacock.
Certainly. But yeah, this would be, I think I would intend for this to be one of the most challenging encounters in the monster manual, because it has the group fight component, it has just the variety of branching paths that the enemies that you would fight in it would take. It has the self-sustain. I think it would be pretty brutal.
Yeah, I would definitely see this as like, what is it? A roaming encounter for at the higher levels.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And to sort of segue into the next one, if you don't mind, the indicator for this, I thought of it as, all right, you're walking down sort of a forest path and you're confronted with a branch. And one of them has, you hear the chittering of creatures in sort of an almost symphonic, orchestrated pattern. And the other one, you encounter a sickly sweet aroma. Just a cloying smell, and this awaits you on the other side.
Oh, I don't like that. That yeah.
What do you mean?
No. I mean like in the way of like that'd be a very like, what is it? One that I would not want to encounter in character. But
this is a brutal.
Yeah, it's definitely got that Venus flytrap. It's going to want to get you in that, and it's not going to want to let go, and you're going to be melted and shunted into the rest of its body. This one seems pretty safe. Right, that kind of like hair or whatever on the top. I can see like a kind of a cactus that goes into what is it? Like, I don't know if that's a feature usually on flowers like that, but I wonder what that's function is. That's the main thing that like that is what is it? Striking, and unexplainable. But the rest is like sickly street aroma, chittering sounds. You hear that, and you go to a different part of the forest. Yeah.
This is, you very much have the right idea that this is a devouring creature, and that it wants to sort of run at you and scoop you up and sort of contain you in this, and that since it's a charging beast, a thing that I wanted to sort of capture with that is the appendage on its head is actually a lance-like sort of spear appendage. And that it attempts to sort of...
Oh, I get it. 2-pronged. So it stabs you, and then it throws you in.
Mm-hmm. But, So a main sort of mechanic for this encounter would be that the sickly sweet smell isn't necessarily a lure for human adjacents. It's actually a lure for other creatures that are in the area. It's a way of sort of forcing aggro to go towards a certain figure while covering them in sort of a sickly sweet substance. It has a corrosive acid that it can cover you with as well, and the lance would draw blood. And a particularly brutal mechanic I had in mind for this one, because due to the fact that it's comparatively a simpler encounter to its counterpart, I wanted to have sort of a charge in terms of just build up power, and then a charge as in go for the attack. Sort of two-part technique, that if a creature, or if a target has those 3 debuffs on them, in the form of sickly sweet syrup, corrosive acid, and blood loss, it's an instant kill on hit.
Ooh.
But it would be a telegraphed one, and you could protect and interrupt it, but...
I mean, the main thing about that is it's a little bit video gamey, which is, you know, like stacking the debuffs and whatever. What I actually kind of think is the blood loss from the spear wound, and it's and either it's corrosive acid or the sickly sweet smell might transmute into some kind of poisoning, poisoning effect, which maybe is not immediate, but may kick in after. So even after the encounter, you know, you're making con checks because, you know, suddenly you've fallen into a fever from this thing. Actually, especially because it's a Venus flytrap. I believe that they make, a lot of their sickly sweet smell from, or no, maybe it's not the Venus flytrap, but I think they make some of their sickly sweet smell from dead things. Kind of like fermenting stuff. So if you get that, it could definitely be like a, save against necritis, you know, from being around dead bodies.
But yeah, I wanted this one to be... I wanted sort of to split the duality between sort of a frightening singular threat that has incredible just raw power behind it, and one that is much more strategically aligned, but perhaps more challenging to fight just on a different axis. So I think what would be crushing about both this encounter and the previous one is that they would be down different branching paths, and no matter which way you decide to go, you're running into something comparatively equally difficult.
Yeah. One way or another, there's going to be one fight this session.
Mm-hmm. And the other thing I wanted to do
Pick your poison.
Symmetry is I wanted to have sort of beast plant. Like if I put the other one up.
I'm okay.
Are you okay?
I'm okay. My.
Alright, and then pull this up.
Someone in my chat said, just set fire to its head. Which probably wouldn't work, so it's because it's a little bit wet. Yeah.
I mean, you could attempt it. It doesn't resist fire or anything, but I don't know if I
Yeah, my drink went down the wrong pipe, one shotty.
Vulnerable to elemental things. Because a lot of the time when I choose, let me just move this over here. And then I'll shrink this one a bit. It's a little large for my liking. Yeah, for this one, these almost exist in a paired format, and that I wanted them to have sort of very similar visual qualities. And that, again, the Predator picture on the right has a very comparatively simple design to go with its more simple encounter, but the Bellowing Rally Beast has a more complex design because it would be a more complex creature to subdue.
Yeah, and the Bellowing Rally Beast, if you don't know what it is definitely going to be, like, you're going to have to take more time to figure it out. And that's also intentional in making it strategic.
But yeah, these I think these two are some of my absolute favorites that I've made in recent years. But yeah. Shall we move on to the
Yep.
Oh, what to pick though? I feel like I should stop picking beasts and I should pick something different. Ooh, alright. So the things I've shown you right now would be considered significant or major sort of creatures.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go to some minor and lesser beasts as well. with these three.
Ah. So I'll start with the simplest, which is the kind of flower spider. And that one is I really like the design of that one. I actually kind of imagine that, people would make rings and like brooches of it. That's just, society. As for its actual behavior and stuff, I actually think of it, very much like a starfish in the way, like basically, as opposed to a spider that builds webs, it's going to build like a fake stalk or fake plant, and then it's going to wait for flies to land on it or bees to land on it, and then bite, down on them. Kind of having this, maybe mouth or whatever that comes out of that little part and grabs onto them. And the next in simplicity, is also very weird and cool. I like the kind of floating spheres in the baubles. Reminds me of like a Metroid or something like that.
I can absolutely, for sure.
Yeah. It has starting off to try to get all the features in. It has those black and like pink polka dot legs, and between that and the baubles, it definitely is something kind of even stranger. I might even say like possibly incorporeal, or like at least like gelatinous. Maybe it can reshape its body in different ways, and those kind of spheres are like its only kind of real organs, and the rest is like a gelatinous body that those can float in. Yeah, and the legs are like extensions of that, and maybe because they go beyond the shell, they change in color. Yeah.
Interesting insights there.
Yeah, and now for the last one, this one is weird too. It seems to have a body, but it also has that like running texture to it, which might kind of be like bark, but then it also abruptly, actually, I thought that was on the inner side, but it actually looks like on the top. So that is more actually like a helmet. So, I know what that actually gave me an idea, which is, it's kind of like especially because the spine's kind of like a armored centipede, where it has those legs on the back, but it's got spines, it's got little furs or whatever, and it's got this helmet, and it can kind of stand up and walk around, but it can also slink along the ground, using its like furred contracting body, and it's probably what it does to attack, to feed, is that little stinger there. Maybe it uses it to inject and draw blood from an animal, possibly when it's sleeping. Maybe it's a poison. I don't imagine it being very big. I imagine it like being, between like either the size of an insect or like the size of a lizard, small lizard.
I think the notions of scale, I think, are absolutely incredible, because again, these are not tiny beasts. The especially the which I'll say the name of it, the calcified shield sludge on the left is about human sized. It's tall. So, in terms of, do you want to hear sort of my design process or habits first, or?
I'd actually love to hear the design process first on these, because I really like I like the sphered creature, and I think it's It's different from the ones we've seen so far. These are all very different. Yeah.
So, generally, when I'm making a collage, the first thing that I look for is kind of a key starting component, just an image that really grabs me and immediately says, "All right, Bellamy, you're going to make you're starting off with this part, and then everything else is going to be subordinate to it." So, for the shield sludge, for example, the first one that I found is actually the correctly identified kind of helmet part. in that it had a very lovely curvature, and again, it has that that mouth component to it, in that it's concave and it swallows up a perhaps rougher edge of the component below. And I saw that it had kind of a purplish hue to it, so I wanted to make a purple creature. So I went scouring, and then I found this lovely, I think it came from an oyster or some kind of clam, in that the running kind of quality to it suggested instantly to me an ooze or some kind of slime-like creature. And just so happened that the way that the top curved, it aligned perfectly with the helmet piece. And then everything else sort of followed suit from there.
Mm.
In that I wanted to make it, I didn't want to make it just a slime that can only pseudopod or kind of flow around the ground. So I wanted to give it sort of more tangible body parts in spite of its sort of gelatin. I wanted to, again, a thing I love about making creatures like this sometimes is I like the contrast between things like the zoological and botanical, the fluid and the solid, the soft and the jagged. Because I think just almost inherently you'll create a compelling design with that, because you have these elements that seem to almost work against each other intuitively, but in practice they work together, I think, rather splendidly. So for this, and going on to the other two, I forget what I named the top right, because I've titled this as others because these are just minor creatures. But the way it would work is that it would project these sort of orbs out for a variety of different effects. And you're right, you're very right about the gelatinous component to it. In that it's almost just a thing that sort of additional minor threats would sort of bubble out from. Not so much that it would spawn kind of discrete creatures, but that it would create sort of hazards and passive threats that would need to be subdued. And for that one, I started off with the legs, actually, because good limbs are very hard to find. In that, especially ones that aren't just already attached to the remainder of a torso. Because if you notice, a lot of my my works sometimes are just the intact sort of animal torso with limbs, with the head removed, because I can't stand having intact heads. The first step whenever I find a component is I decapitate the animal. Invariably. Always. First step, just take it to the guillotine. So
my.
Really... Huh?
My.
Yeah. But when I find some very good limbs, usually those are either a very distinct component, like, again, the helmet, or some very solid limbs or parts of anatomy are usually the first thing that I look for when creating a new collage. And then for this, oftentimes I don't really have a very concrete idea of the creature I'm going to make going into it. And what happens is the creature almost assembles itself as I scour more and more of the image sources that I have. And then I will, the creature will kind of passively assemble itself into something hopefully interesting.
Yeah, whenever I do art, it's very much the same, where I just, you know, are putting things together until I get a whole. Even when I what is it? I had to do an art piece of a scene outside, and even then I was like trying to figure out, what colors, what I'm actually going to depict from this, and just kind of spontaneously doing it. And so, like, one half of the page, which I did one day, was very different from the other half. Just because of the mindset I was approaching it at the time. So yeah, to go over things, this is something I thought of about the sludge, the sludge. What do you say? A sludge pede or
the shield sludge?
Shield sludge. All right, the shield sludge, which is that maybe those, to go on the theme of like those baubles being organs, but also something to project. Maybe that is. Like the thing itself will collapse after you get all of those. So either it's sending those out, for an advantage, but that also gives you the opportunity to attack them. And maybe like its special thing is, okay, you're not going to be able to cut and slash it to death. But what you can do is poke or attack a bunch of those, and they're very weak on their own. So potentially it could be more about the number of hits you're doing rather than just, pure overall damage.
I think that's certainly a possible solution. But I think in terms of just strategies, one of my favorite just composition and just form into function moments was again is very much with the shield sludge, in that sort of its gimmick is that it would secrete its ooze onto either the environment to create these sharp calcified spines to potentially puncture, just make things unwalkable, or what it does is it will provide sort of an armor bonus and defensive utility by slathering an ally with them. To sort of create not only plates that serve as defense, but also make physical contact potentially perilous.
Yeah, I actually, when you described it, I thought of that as like kind of an underlying, because there's that big helmet there, an underlying bone structure. But from what you say, it seems much more fluid. Like it could even change those, and perhaps there's different varieties with more complex armor.
I think it's certainly a possibility.
Yeah, like maybe when it matures, and maybe like you find like a juvenile one, and it's just got its helmet. But you find like an elder one, and it's very big, and it looks like a what is it? Like a massive suit of armor with spines all around the joints. Perfect defense.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and about your design process, you can have my limbs, just don't mail my head back to my family in a box.
Noted. No, generally with humans, I keep the heads intact, but I just fasten an image over it in the form of a mask or a helmet.
All right, that's nice. I see. I have a very I see on my model. There's a very distinct line where I would be cut from.
And honestly, that would be, when I see distinct lines like that, for example, on a dog collar, is a very. That's actually the one I'll bring up next. But
Ooh.
The dog collar, when it's present, is the perfect sort of bisection point to affix something different to the head. And speaking of dogs, let us go on to that one next. Where is it? There we go. And here we are. Initial thoughts.
All right. So, besides the dogs initially appearing to be geriatrics, but that's not the case. Those are long arms, and yeah. Well, the religious side of me is saying that this is some kind of bizarre. This is some kind of bizarre supernatural miracle, and it almost actually could, I think, could almost be like a divine one, but for dogs. Like this is maybe because there is that that bird cage and those large horns on top of the tablecloth. Maybe it's like this is like a manifestation of kind of like a dog's conception of a human hunter made into a god, kind of. It's got its dog attendants under the table. It's got and it has its birds in a cage, and it has its antlers on the wall, and so all these things are kind of brought together, and of course it's given wings so it can fly, and then its attendants are like a large maybe the why their noses are so long is because of or because of dogs bred for the really long noses to be able to sniff stuff out. If you've ever seen the really funny bloodhounds where their nose goes up and down when they sniff, yeah, it's like that where except their head, of course, they're extra intimidating. They're a hunt even beyond death. So they've got the long heads, which are skulls, and actually if they're hunting beyond death, perhaps they've traded in their normal dog legs for long hands, which they can grasp up with, so they can be better hunters.
I think that's a wonderfully compelling theory. I actually very, very much enjoy that interpretation.
Thank you.
So, all right, should I do design process again before going into sort of lore explanation, or
I'd say go into the lore explanation because I just saw it, which exhumes the roadkill. That's a metal name.
Yeah, the title given to this entity. So something that so this is basically a necromantic sort of angel that will resuscitate those creatures that have perished before their time, specifically in the form of the newest form of sort of animal death, which is the form of sort of roadkill, and that for most of sort of biological history, there weren't cars to flatten beasts by the roadside. So this sort of has dominion over those which have been slain in such a
and that's why the animal bodies have twisted limbs underneath its tablecloth.
Mm-hmm. Like these are not intact, sort of perfect skeletons and untarnished and untorn creature bodies. These are those that have been automotively maimed, but now have new life breathed into them by this entity. Not to pat myself out on the back or anything, but this is one of the most perfect triangle compositions I've ever made. It's so unified. But
I should have impressed my art teacher by pointing out the triangle. Better luck next time.
But so the starting what do you think the starting component for this was?
I would say the starting component, because it's very distinct, is the dog bodies.
Do you mean
the ones under the ones under the tablecloth? And the reason is because you probably cut the head off those, and thought, and they're like, and they do actually look to be in a painted style. So I think maybe the limbs were twisted more, but they were maybe from another piece, and you thought like, oh, this is like these are very interesting dogs.
Mm-hmm. So you're very right. That's absolutely the component that I started with. But the thing is, this is an image that I found somehow from an old manuscript of a pair of conjoined cats.
Oh.
So those are not two separate creatures. Those are the same creature fused at the upper torso.
And that's pretty metal.
Right? I never expected to find anything like that in the image archives I go on, and yet here's one of the most unique components I've ever found. And naturally, when I see sort of creatures like that, my mind immediately thinks, all right, this is a beast that's often floating in sort of a formaldehyde solution. And the serene look on the eyes, I know the eyes aren't there, but the look of the original image was serene enough that I immediately made sort of an angelic connection. And so I'm like, all right, this is a saint of, or an angelic sort of entity of sort of maimed and torn and disfigured. And I thought, all right, what's an interesting way to sort of handle that? And then, of course, my mind went to roadkill. So from that point, I added the wings. Then I added the tablecloth as an interesting way to both suggest the modern and also cover the decapitated heads again. But I realized that it looked kind of sparse, so I added and I wanted to create sort of a visual symmetry with the bony components of the dog, so I added the bone antlers at the top, as it were, which I think again adds to the visual symmetry of pairs for the composition.
Mm-hmm. And it adds to the kind of idea that this is a human effect on the animal because they look like they've been mounted, trophies.
For sure.
As for how these interact with the world, especially so. Definitely, that main angel is the last thing you're gonna see. That is gonna be held for the big reveal. So it's gonna be the smaller little attendants with the long hands and the skulls. And I think that would be like, you pull over to the side of the highway, you're making out with your honey, and then man hand hook, car door hand hook. these because of the human hands, I imagine that even though they're skeletal, that if you're irresponsible in driving, these animals will come out and appear at first to be, a person, especially because they're at a lower level from where you're looking from the car window. It could be like, knock on your car door, or even just open up your car door, trying to get you to come out. And, eventually, the angel is supervising everything. So maybe after they've, gotten back onto a now very uncomfortably quiet highway after, getting their car started or whatever and fending off these guys, they look in the back mirror and that thing is moving towards them at way faster speeds than what should be possible.
Mm-hmm. I can absolutely conceive of this as a horror encounter, and that this isn't a thing that you would find in, like, you wouldn't go to a temple and then find this thing in the center surrounded by a pack of reanimated dogs. You would definitely find this in a place that you both would and wouldn't expect it, but the entire time you would hope not to encounter it. But I also don't know if it's an inherently malevolent creature to those who are responsible behind the wheel. I think this is a very neutral entity that exists to exhume, and then what the creatures do with their new lease on life is ultimately up to them.
Yeah, maybe it could become that some of those it's revived are after you, and that by hurting them you draw its attention. Like that way. Like it cares. You said it's neutral, and I kind of imagine the same thing. It cares for the road-killed animals, but it's probably indifferent to you. And that indifference means it can totally steamroll you, if you have offended it.
Certainly, yeah. This is, it's not a malevolent creature, but it's certainly not benevolent. To you, at least.
Become roadkill first.
Certainly.
Alright.
Shall we move on to the next one?
Yep.
Alright, let me pick one to represent here. Let's go with some more minor creatures. Perhaps these.
Ooh. So, two aquatic creatures. I'm going to start with the one on the bottom, which is an eel with crab legs. And I believe that's also a snail's head at the top. But more than that, maybe it has its eyes on those stalks, but it's probably going to function much like an eel. And I think this one, it is a minor creature, but I actually imagine that this is the size of a regular eel, and that those crab legs, it's going to use to fish for smaller, creatures on the ocean floor. Maybe you could find this as like an exotic thing at a reef or something like that. So the big eel is very maneuverable, but it's got all these little hands by which it can pick and grab at things hiding in little places and all that. And the toucan fish, actually, the toucan fish is probably bigger. And what strikes out to me is what is the toucan beak for? And so what made me think of that is, I don't actually know too much about toucans, but it could also be like a pelican beak. And so maybe what this says is, you run the, because it's not going to want to have this big bright beak if it's hunting fish. Maybe it's hunting the pelicans, Like a beak comes up from the water, it's struggling or whatever. I don't know how pelicans behave, but they come close, and then it's like, then it's like a very strong, large fish with the beak, clenches down, grabs them, drags them down like an alligator. And I actually think that alligators like alligators will do the same thing with not with pretending to be other creatures, but just if you've ever seen an alligator like pasted onto the floor, just waiting for you to come and so it can bite you. Yeah. And these are labeled deep trench creatures, so I was probably wrong about it being surface creatures.
You were, but that's more than fine, because just because that's where they're native to doesn't necessarily mean that they can't leave. But so again, I'll go for the design components first. So the starting component for the I'm trying to remember what I called these.
I find it very interesting that they appear to be made of the components of tropical creatures. The bright blue crab legs, the pelican beak and whatever, but they're from the deep trench. Now that actually makes me think that maybe this deep trench, things go into it but don't always return the same. It's like the forbidden part of the reef or whatever, and that could be an adventure in itself.
Certainly. But yeah, I forgot which component I started with the one on top. I think I want to say I started with the toucan beak, and then everything fell into place from there. And I remember immediately my design process for this. So, generally speaking, the creatures that I make are mostly land-based, because there's a lot more silhouette variety or so I thought at least, in creatures that roam the earth instead of creatures that live beneath the waves. But I hadn't really made any strictly aquatic beasts up until this point. So I wanted to make two very unambiguously oceanic creatures. The one on top actually was a surprisingly difficult assembly job, in that I don't know if you can tell, but do you see how the shark body is subsumed into the squid?
Yeah.
So the way that this works is that the squid and the shark are on two separate layers, and to make certain that the squid back was appropriately behind the shark without any of the shark being obscured, what I had to do was I had to manually erase around that part. I had to put the shark on top. Wait, yeah, I had to put the shark on top so that the back would be underneath it. But since it has the part that wraps around it and covers the front, I then had to erase sort of the shark head along the outline of the squid tendril, or the squid sort of webbing. And I had to do the same for where the fin, which again created a lovely sort of shape symmetry there, in that the tentacle went along with the contour of the fin.
Yeah, that sounds difficult. Mushy, find someone, ask around about a cereal box. That's all I can legally say on stream, but, treat yourself to Photoshop.
And then I wanted something to sort of cover the squid head so it wouldn't immediately look like a squid. And I was like, all right, what do I think of when I think of a shark? I think of mouth. I think of jaws. So my mind immediately is like, all right, let me find the most incredible and robust mouth I can think of. And my mind went to the toucan, because I'm imagining that opening up, only it has sort of the rows of shark teeth that a shark would have that would just constantly replace themselves. And as far as the bottom one goes, I wanted to make kind of a hagfish style slime eel creature, but I didn't want it to solely be this is just a kind of squiggly straight line, which is why I added the limbs for an extra sort of level of depth to it. And the way that the legs are sort of oriented in the component piece that I took them from, when I pivoted them 90 degrees to the right, it looked like they were drifting or flowing backwards. So I immediately was like, all right, this is a creature that drifts and then uses its claws to sort of snag the things that it drifts past, or it will turn and become aggressive when somebody intersects with its sort of slime trail that it leaves in the water.
So it's hunting by, using the slime kind of like a web, actually.
Oh,
At least for detection. At least for detection. Tripwire, yeah.
Certainly. But yeah, I'm quite proud of how these came out, because this is my first foray into aquatic creatures.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just thinking about, because I know of, just with junior image editing, I've done stuff like had to manually erase, everything that's covering stuff. It's not fun. I'm so, the quick selection tool is your or what is it? Magnetic lasso is like your best friend once you learn about it.
I like to do everything manually to make certain that it's perfect. Like, to the point where I will zoom in to, like, this depth to erase, like, an errant pixel, like that one, which I'm going to go back and change once the stream's over. You laugh. You think I jest.
I laugh because you do not jest.
I'm very meticulous at these.
Well, yeah, you saw my pre-stream thing. Slapdash, remove white mat.
Whatever works.
Yeah.
Shall we move on to another?
Yep.
Final questions?
I mean, actually, yeah, I kind of brought it up with the deep trench, but what's made the origin story for these guys, other than just being, naturally bizarre creatures? Because I liked to imagine that maybe the deep trench did something to them on its own.
I'll say this, is that due to the deep trench being the way that the deep trench is, the jury is still mostly out, because very few expedition parties come back from there, and those that do rarely have the time to do any in-depth sort of research. So it's a particularly perilous neck of the ocean, as it were.
A lot of legends and tales about it told, with no backing.
Certainly.
On to the next one.
All right. Let's pick. Let's go for a kind of different one, a different series that I've done. Yeah. This is from a different series from my usual sort of zoological compositions, in that I used a bit more of a crafted approach. But here's this one.
So, yeah, the little statue is breathing out this what I don't know how to put it, but it definitely isn't, real. It's almost like it is the style, but it's also how it is, which is just that it's kind of cut into reality, and you're seeing the stuff of world beyond it, which occasionally leaves stick out over it. But sometimes you just are witnessing, the bizarre green void underneath. And so this statue, which is actually nicely made of garden ornaments and stuff. I like that touch. With its
with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 discrete components that I cobbled together.
Yeah, I can see. Besides the little growth on its head, I can see one of those rocks for a suburban house, kind of made into a skull. One of those bird feeders. Then kind of a cloth underneath, and then the boots. And so that thing in itself, because it looks like suburban garden ornaments and stuff, which now are commonplace, but might be the stuff you would find at like a gaudy mansion back in the day. I like to imagine that this is the product of this is the product of someone rich and wealthy sorcerer, where the thing itself it has these little legs which probably go into its base when it's not moving, but otherwise it looks like normal garden a weird garden implement. You know, you got the skull in the bird feeder or whatever, some plants growing off from it. You know, you turn your back on it, it gets up, starts moving towards you, and then the giant, and then, you know, let's say we're going off of like a fate or interpretation of mages, where it's just like, you know, weird things, and you could be and you know, you're totally at their mercy. It's just more fun to bisect into the dimension of endless growth. And that thing in itself, maybe the thing which comes out of it isn't even directly hostile. It's not going to rip you to bits or whatever. It's just a kind of like animated little cross section of that, which, you know, if you fall into it, you're getting you're slowly falling. You know, you're basically falling from a height through trees for eternity. Not the best fate. As for its little claws and feelers and stuff, that might just be a byproduct of that. But I definitely get the idea that this is like a very strange and bizarre, you know, defense mechanism for just showing off.
That's again, incredibly compelling theories. But so this is of a series that I did of marble paper studies called and this is one of the Bestowed, which are, I would describe as sort of cosmic horror adjacent entities from the furthest reaches of observable reality. In that very few, if any, expeditions go out to sort of interact with and subdue them. In that they have a property to warp and distort the area immediately around them into a favorable environment, but also bestow seemingly strange and permanent ill omens or not even ill omens, just effects on those who manage to return with their lives intact. So the main motif for this creature is that this is the Bestowed of Fortune, and I wanted it to have almost a lucky clover sort of gimmick to it. And you're very observant about the garden ornaments property to it, and that was the starting point for this was the little plant vase, which I've gotten rid of all the flowers from it, but that was what it started as. And then I wanted this to be a creature that just radiates kind of a horrific luck aura in the form of just planting sort of impossible clovers kind of all over the area it's found in, which will siphon away fortune or promote negative fortune for those attempting to interact with it with violence. Seeing as how these are as dangerous as they are, it's still not technically known if they're necessarily hostile, just that they have a great power that they're capable of, and that very few expedition parties are able to return.
And if it's attacking you, you're getting attacked with luck, and that is a bizarre, you know, thing in itself. Yeah, I definitely also saw the cosmic horror vibes from it. I just thought of it in the more like, okay, maybe humanity hasn't mastered this, but they're definitely weaponizing it for the you know, for fun. That's why I mentioned, you know, Fate, and where like I'd say like Human Echo is also a good example, where, you know, wizards are just playing with things, and you really don't want to be playing with them on their home turf. But when you mentioned you know, kind of eldritch things infecting reality, I could actually see this as that, where, you know, maybe because he said it's on the furthest reaches, you know, it's a very odd and definitely, you know, like esoteric concept, but maybe the furthest reaches are kind of like the equivalent of the Farlands or parallel universes, if you've ever seen that meme video, where it's just like it's kind of like everything starts to repeat and seems normal, but it isn't right. It's like what is it? If you've ever played an old game, the out of bounds segments where you just see all the sprites coming together, you know, on top of each other. yeah, and so this is like, a bunch of garden stuff, which might even kind of symbolize, like, because of their garden ornaments, and then all these plants. It's both like the concept of like being fruitful and lucky in the survival sense, like plants, but also being fortunate in like the monetary sense, that this is like, that you've kind of like almost like the American dream, like get lucky has made this suburban has made this like suburban garden stuff into this, blended those two together into this, strange, conceptualization of luck, which someone might actually, it might actually just be what people see, because of their conception of luck. That might not be its true form.
I won't tell you your interpretations are wrong.
Yeah.
But yeah, just I started with for every one of the bestowed that I did, my starting component was always the shape that I cut from the marble paper. And then everything else followed.
Let's see.
Shall we move on to the next?
Well, actually, we should do the little bestiary bit, which is,
certainly.
because if you're going to encounter this, it's going to need stats. And so you mentioned, blessings and luck and stuff like that. I think that how this might actually, what might actually make this so deadly is that, not that it's going to harm you, but that by being around it, you're going to get more lucky. And that doesn't sound like a bad thing, but I think it could maybe be like luck transference, where it's like you're lucky, but other people are not. So that could,
somebody as the lucky target at the cost of everybody else's fortune.
Yeah. And so like they're sucking the luck out of everything around them, at least for a time. And you could represent, I feel like this would be a very narrative encounter, where like if you get blessed by one of these, if you get blessed by one of these, it's probably going to run off / de-manifest, before you can attack it or bargain with it or anything like that. If you could even do such things, you probably can't. And then you're like dealing with basically that lost episode where he wins the lottery using the cursed numbers. Oh, I won the lottery, but the lady, my mother, who I gave my mansion to, gets arrested by the police and the house burns down.
Very, like, monkey's paw kind of.
Yeah.
Okay. I do think that in terms of mechanics, this thing would not only interfere with your luck in terms of, it would definitely be every like campaign that I've run has been narrative focused, and that I'm not the hugest fan of number crunching RPG systems.
Oh, me neither.
I like them that function more as like freeform storytelling with that. Like, I don't want to have to consult the spell book for how many dice I have to roll for lightning bolt. Like, if your character can plausibly do something, you shouldn't need like a rigid mechanical structure to govern the actions you can take. But I do think this would be interesting to like interfere with roll thresholds, with even dice values. Just things that are like, even like abstractions in the abstractions in the form of the players themselves are affected.
Yeah, that would definitely be like the first clue about it. And it would definitely work. This wouldn't work for D&D because you're not going to because what is it? Advantage disadvantage is going to be too game breaking, and they're going to turn it into, okay, how far do we need to stand away from someone? But like in a narrative system, like, yeah, definitely could be like, oh, you're standing around them, or you're just in the same group as them, That's minus 10% to your roll threshold. You, on the other hand, get plus 20%. Hello, Edward Lance Kingston. Welcome.
Hello, Edward. I'm good, personally.
Yeah, I'm good as well. We are discussing some bizarre eldritch creatures. If you have any thoughts, you can put them in chat, and I'll read them out.
Certainly. Shall we move on to the next?
Yeah.
All right, let's all right, are you feeling a more grounded creature or another bestowed?
I'd say another bestowed.
All right, let's go for, I think, probably my favorite of the series.
Oh, I definitely got like Madoka Witches vibes from this.
That may or may not have been.
Yeah, the inspiration.
May or may not have been a thing that I was studying for this series.
All right, so. Can I just ask a question? Is this the one about rulership you mentioned earlier? You mentioned that there'd be a creature about rulership. All right, so it's not rulership.
This is not this one.
Then, well, I definitely because of the machine and the crown, and even those little metal baubles and the gold fringes, I definitely get that this is themed around production in some sort. Maybe the accumulation, and it's like and well, firstly, I should probably look at that skirt more, as well as its legs, but. Yeah, and there doesn't even seem to be even geometric bases to its legs, but that was the vibe I got from its head. Now I see also in the head there's crystal too. But the legs look very ethereal, and odd. I feel like those aren't always points. Like they bend around and are very very maneuverable, but also very sharp, like energy tendrils. And the skirt, the bottom of its dress, well, really the only kind of thing it is wearing. It also, now that look, it looks like it has bolts and plates. So I'm gonna say that this is maybe a representation of accumulation, machinery, capital, etc. Where it has both raw resources, machines, and energy, and I could even see those kind of golden golden white leaves coming out of it is kind of like the end product, because I don't know where they fit elsewhere. So this is like, that's kind of my take on it. And as for how it's going to interact with people as with Rose, if you encounter this, encountering this, it's not gonna. I wouldn't say would give you luck. I would say it's going to compartmentalize more of your life. Like, more of your stuff will be orderly, machine like. Maybe in behavior, maybe you get better at working or whatever, but you've lost some of your emotional touch elsewhere, or maybe it's like you begin to see like the systems of reality, and that can be kind of shattering in itself when basically you realize, like, you see the dialogue tree for your boss, and you realize maybe like his, like, you unintentionally realize maybe his home situation or something like that by like the suggested choice or something like that, just like something that seems like a blessing but is a curse, kind of like the isekai appraise power, but it's not fun because you can't turn off, and you don't want to know everything about everything.
That's a very, very compelling set of theories. So regarding my design process for this, once again, I started with the marble paper at the center, sort of craning stalk, because I liked the shape of it. And regarding sort of the industrial components and the crystals, and I wanted this to be sort of a creature that represents sort of mining and extraction. Very, very much you were very spot on with the production component, in that this is a creature of generating wealth and luxury, is essentially its sort of core component.
What I initially was gonna say is like a creature of sovereignty. That's why I asked you about rulership. That it is like the ability to create, protect, and produce on this large scale of power. Like it is the industrial power base made real.
Certainly. And okay, so it does have kind of a regal component to it, but it's not the one that I was immediately thinking of for like the regal collage. Although I can definitely see why that would be the initial takeaway for it, but I did want to represent sort of a very materially gifted sort of entity in that it's covered with, it has the flowing robes and the exquisite linens and the minerals that it's sort of hauled from the earth. And I also think that it would be interesting for this, another thing I've written down is that those who've returned from this expeditions have had parts of their bodies like irrevocably petrified in the form of sort of a precious stone, or have had it, or the limbs that they're missing have been extracted for whatever purpose. So, like, again, with the interestingly enough, it generates wealth from those it affects with its sort of passive and active abilities, but it in turn makes them less productive. Because you're damaging limbs, you're shattering them off, you're making the joints unmovable because you've replaced the cartilage with a nice, vibrant sort of.
So it isn't even a monkey's paw gift. It's just converting. It's going to convert everything. Everything's going into the machine and coming out as this very nice, probably very useful, quote unquote useful in like the platonic sense of useful stuff, which probably isn't worth a limb.
But yeah, I definitely wanted to with this also I wanted to just see how many different kinds of images I could use, or images that looked different from one another. So this is maybe one of the more eclectic collages I've made, in that you have the marble paper, you have the lithograph illustrations, you have things that are surprisingly illustrations and not photographs at the top, even though they almost look. On that, Edward, so this is, I think the creatures that I make in terms of sort of allegory to real life concepts tend to be a bit more abstract than that. And I like leaving things open to, if that's a sort of message that resonates with you, you should be able to sort of take this as sort of perhaps embodying that concept. But in terms of what sort of where my mind went, again, I won't tell you that your interpretation's incorrect, but this is definitely more of an actual beast that you could bump into with your boys on a particularly treacherous expedition.
And that's what I like, is it's like it isn't just it isn't a statement on the concept. With this, it's very much is the concept, and it's however you take the concept. And I definitely was in my analysis like, oh, I think that's like the energy, and those are the raw materials, and those are the machines. So it is this mining, extraction, converting. It is like the machine, but it's like the very abstract machine.
Certainly.
And if you bump into quote unquote the abstract machine, you're not an abstract being. It's not going to be a fun time for you.
Not at all. You're fleshy and feeble, and perfect for converting into raw materials.
Yeah, this is a don't get noticed, because don't get noticed, and if you do get noticed, you can feel the tips of your fingertips beginning to harden, and by the end of the next round, those fingers are not going to work anymore. Very, very permanent, harsh consequences.
Certainly. Like, these are very much, I've always envisioned them in the monster manual as being endgame if you could reach this point sort of threats to encounter. In that. So, a thing that I've conceived of for this whole kind of setting is that there are a number of different threat levels, because of course there are, ranging, I think the threat levels are lesser, or it's minor than lesser, then significant, treacherous, and then calamitous. Calamitous is the highest ranking threat level, and these are without a doubt calamitous threats. In that, a calamitous threat is one that even a fully equipped, expert team of explorers with incredible objects looted from their environments and gear to go against them will expect heavy casualties with even a perfect plan.
In terms of stats for these things, I very much imagined these popping up in the Great Old Ones section. They have stats. They're not meant to be fought, and when you can fight them, it's because you've either as part of the scenario or you're planning, you've gotten some stuff together, and even then it's like a temporary banishment where it's a temporary banishment. It's very much like what is it? You're sending Cthulhu back to sleep essentially, and the encounters with them are because you made an exploration game. I definitely also see these as things that you would encounter from a distance and would have permanent effects on characters. That you might find on a random encounter table. Like, these things are wandering around, and you're gonna see it, 20 miles off. You need to prepare before it gets here. And that either means, finding a river and just, getting out of there. Or, hunkering down or even going underground to some place that's potentially dangerous. Because it's better than being on the surface.
Mm-hmm. No, certainly. I'm imagining just you catch a glimpse of one of these off in the distance, and something profound happens to you, even just by sort of indirect exposure.
Yeah, I would at least give what is it? I would at least give on the horizon line. If it's on the horizon line, you're good. If it's something within viewing distance, you're bad. But you can see these. On the horizon line, these will look massive and strange, and, you'll be alerted.
It would be kind of lensing the world around them, not in terms of just a black hole twisting light, but there would be sort of a radius around them that would look dramatically different from the world that you're used to.
Or maybe if you can't see them beyond the horizon line for whatever reason, there's going to be, minor effects that you begin to perceive associated with it.
Distortions.
Yeah.
Certainly.
Because these are wandering in the world, I think it would be specifically, certain. I like to imagine, in addition to maybe small tweaks to the environment, because that could also be tweaks for a much smaller monster. What I think makes these big is you'll immediately begin to feel certain mental, physical, or or visual effects, like for the luck one. Maybe the effect of the luck one, if you're close to it and it's approaching, but it's not, but you're in the mountains, not on the horizon line. So this is your other cue is maybe your characters begin to have premonitions of their luck for the next thing they're gonna do. Basically, you have them pre-roll, and that tells them, okay, these are our pre-rolls. Let's make a plan to get out of here using these pre-rolls. Yeah, that might be that makes a puzzle. Yeah.
Or even something just you're one of the characters sort of coughs up a gold coin. It's well. Things are getting real bad real quick.
Mm-hmm. Is my audio good, Edward? I see it going up and down in OBS, so. If it's getting cut off or whatever, just tell me.
Now we move on to the next.
Yep.
All right, let's get back to the more tangible here, shall we?
Yep.
Let's see. Which one do I want next? It's always the question.
All right, that's good to hear.
Let's go. All right, let's go. Speaking of the regal one, we'll go to that one next.
Ooh. So, yeah, with this, is this another? You said that this is a more tangible one, right?
Yeah,
or is it one of the
actual creature?
okay, this is an actual creature. I was gonna go for another like symbolic one because it definitely gave me what is it that like exotic prince ship vibe. Where this is like where this would be like the concept of like kind of like the Aladdin prince. Like someone who just has their like own like who has built up their own strange kind of menagerie world because they're just so wealthy, so detached from the common. Yeah, but as for this creature, if it's just a tangible thing, I was you of course got the I love the yellow to gold to that kind of constant theme trailing up it. But I'm looking at the top currently. That looks to me almost I believe that's a banner. That's a banister piece. What runs like you would run a rail on a staircase. At least for sampling, that's what it looks like to me. And then the wood stuff looks like wood carvings, and it's also got those little feelers. What this kind of how I'd think this would act is like I actually feel like this is another creature that's going to be surrounded by other creatures. And maybe what this one does is it's explicitly more in like the be ruled these like it's kind of either it uses those like those feelers to like induce an effect in other creatures, or it's just an innate thing. But it's like they perceive it, or maybe even specifically if we want to go for like very symbolic stuff, that little box on its head in like very Kaaba-like sense, like and they revere and venerate it, and so its survival relies on having on having a bunch of animals basically that are tending to it, that want to protect it from harm, and all the stuff in it is like the giraffe, like the crown, like the bird, etc., is maybe evolved ways to imply rulership on some kind of like on multiple symbolic levels. Maybe these are even worshipped by humans, and have evolved codependently, like maybe many kings will go to these things to be recognized, like they are the origin of the idea of kings, in much the way of like crowning stones and stuff like that. Those are my thoughts.
Again, Fleur, you have incredible theories on this. So yeah, so you're very right about this creature having a retinue that it relies on for survival. And the way that I sort of see it interacting with those around us is that it is a very cruel sort of ruler, to the point that, unlike the other... so the way that it would work is that it can sort of force lesser creatures to take actions that might be physically impossible for them to take. Such as like sort of willing a creature to conjure up an attack that it would not be able to do, or for its anatomy to stretch and bend for a tech, like say it's a small kind of squat frog-like creature. It could will it to sort of do a sweeping long-range strike.
So it is like the king's decree is absolute, taken to its extreme.
Certainly.
What, you can't do that? Okay, do it.
That's unfortunate. You'll be taking that action whether you like it or not. And I imagine the same could be the case for... It could override sort of the will of like a humanoid as well, though not with as much with a lot more difficulty than it would sort of a lesser creature. But I do envision it as sort of a tyrannical kind of beast that demands a lot from those around it, even though it might not need it. Like it accumulates surplus to have sort of as a stash. But yeah, I wanted this to sort of be a very regal looking, very opulent, but also kind of unstable and unsteady, and that I wanted it to sort of suggest kind of a rickety tower with its design.
Ooh, yeah. I kind of imagined it in like the delicate balance kind of way, you know, everything like it's like that's part of it being what is it noble, like, you know, like walking with a book on top of your head, that kind of you know, like super posture, which shows that it's elegant and graceful, and you know, all that. I see Babbling Tower is the name, and yeah, with the kind of a what is it, you know, kingly, and then also at the top as I thought, like religious imagery that like kind of makes sense, like even like the terms of like the Tower Tarot card, you know, where that would explicitly imply that these things are probably going to be felled, you know, that they're acting in hubris. Which, yeah, if your explorers encounter one, they're probably gonna do that. As for how, like, my process of like deducing these things, and this is actually something your collages are very good for. It's I studied a lot of Jung in my free time last summer, and so, you know, that comes down to basically symbols are archetypes are conceptual, you know, and so, you know, you take something, and everything in the world is symbols still, so and that's kind of the universal language. So, you know, in this, like, these are all, like, to me, these are all like very either very these are all very regal symbols, and at the top there's like something which is almost religiously evocative, and like being a mantle or worship piece, you know. But you got like the exotic giraffe and the crown and the goldfinch, and I don't know if you consciously or unconsciously picked up on that, or if you just thought like, oh, this fits the aesthetic, because that's how we understand symbols normally.
I'll leave that up to you to decide whether or not these are deliberately symbols or coincidence. Because at the end of the day, I don't necessarily know if, in terms of art, that it necessarily matters. And that symbols, whether they're consciously picked or unconsciously picked, I think that we fundamentally have associations that we make, even if we don't deliberately think about them. Like, obviously, the crown was a very deliberate choice, and the color gold, perhaps, was the thing that made me choose the bird. But now, again, it also suggests perhaps the bloated pheasant, as it were. And just, I think that's one of my favorite things about surrealism, is how the symbols creep in and sort of inspire you to start coming up with immediate associations to make.
Oh yeah, the symbols work on us, not the other way around. They'll find their ways to come out. All right. On to the next one.
On to the next. Ooh, this is a tough choice. What do I want to do next? Let's do... This one's an old one, surprisingly, but it's a classic. So I'm gonna go for this one.
Oh yeah, I've seen this one. It's maybe like the second one I saw after the one I put on the poster, the like flower-headed one. Yeah, I really like this one. It's definitely like the conceptualization of the Eldritch the Eldritch Beast, because all these crystals jutting out of it give the most unnatural and odd, both in the fact that like crystals are very geometric things as opposed to being organic, but also in the way that they seem to, you know, like be like energy, implying that it's not holy material. And I kind of for this beast, it's this you know, its body is fur, and it has all these crystals adorning it, just to cover all the elements. And it's got that little snake-like tail. But, of course, the face, that's definitely blasting lasers at you. This thing, especially with all its like colors and stuff, I imagine it's like fur rippling as it as it like charges up to fire a laser at you, and all the kind of crystals are stopping points on the energy, and maybe because that tail is very like what is it, is furless and kind of organic and stuff like that. If it's charging up from like the back or center of its body, then that tail could be kind of like a kind of like a grounding line, if that makes sense. Maybe one of its disadvantages is it's not going to be as effective. If you cut that off, it's not going to be as effective at discharging its energy, whether that means cooling itself off or literally as it's as it's firing, that's like its way of making sure it doesn't electrocute itself. I see these as being trophy creatures, in part because you get awesome treasure if you kill them, but also because that gold and silver fur is really nice, and that's something I'd pay top dollar for.
You certainly have the right idea with this being sort of a luxury kind of treasure beast, because that was absolutely the thing that I designed it with this in mind. And actually, the main treasure is not even the gold and silvery rest of it. It's actually the emeralds at its head are the main thing of value, because, as you said, that they have a conductive sort of property to them. I hadn't necessarily thought of this as a beam creature, but I definitely didn't think of it as, because I made this, I think, 3-4 years ago.
Ooh.
This is one of the first forays of like creature design in the style that I really do. That I do currently, at any rate. But I definitely thought of this as, alright, this is a thing that you want to get. Oh, what is that? Is that a... Oh, that's just part of it. Okay. Like, this is definitely something that is coveted among hunters. And let me zoom in appropriately. Oh, too appropriate. But yeah, it certainly would have sort of either a conductive power or it would amplify things. And of course, because I didn't want this to be just a mundane, it bashes its body into you sort of creature. I wanted there to be more to it than just that. And I'm really glad that a lot of sort of the visual motifs and themes came across to you just in this composition.
Yeah, what made me think, in part of why I'd say this should be a ranged creature, is because in the kind of vein of the metal slime, this thing is not going to want to be staying around long, and I think it would. And actually, I imagine it being very fast and it being able to get to range. And so even when you close the distance between you and it, it's gonna have ways to get around, either teleportation or just being able to move supernaturally fast or whatever. Also, in part because like I don't think it should be like just taking shots at you and running, which if you're not on horses or something like that, you're kind of screwed at being able to get to it. I like to imagine that it's going to want to preserve its existence by like mounting down and firing its big green laser at you like an artillery piece. But when you get into close range, it's gonna stand up, turn tail, and try to go to somewhere else more advantageous. Maybe if we're going off the gem thing, I initially thought of this as like a plainsy type creature or whatever, but now specifically thinking about it, this would be something excellent to encounter in mountains where maybe it can jump. So you've climbed up to it. And it jumps up to the next one, and also on mountains it can be very perilous because you get hit, or it hits the rocks and there's a rock slide or falling off or whatever.
Certainly, yeah.
Oh, long text.
Big comment.
Yeah.
Emeralds reflecting light to stun enemies.
Ooh,
good idea.
I like that.
Uses
tail to sense movement since it can't see. Ooh. Yeah.
So on the subject of vision, I don't really use eyes in anything. So I kind of just generally treat senses as sort of a lot of these sort of operate presumably on presence and just vibes, if that makes sense, in that they don't have sort of discrete sensory organs most of the time. So I kind of just like they can detect things because they can detect things.
I get that, but I do like the idea of because its tail is so fleshy, like that being the vibration sensor, which means that maybe the strategic play for this is to try to hit the tail, which of course is somewhat protected. But if you're smart about it, you can, and it's a small target, yeah. But then it's really messed up, and it's kind of firing blindly until it regrows that.
Mm-hmm. Again, great ideas, great interpretations. Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't wait to actually sit down and write a proper monster manual. I might do that this weekend.
That sounds like a fun project. I'll definitely. What is it? If you need a beta reader or whatever, I'll definitely do.
I'll run it by you. Shall we go to the next?
Yep.
Do you want to do one or two more?
Let's do two more.
All right. I think I know which one I want to end it off with. But the question is, what's the one to bridge it? You know what? Actually, all right. This one is a personal favorite of mine. I think I had so much fun putting this together.
Oh, I like it. It's so colorful. So I'll try to go, because there's so many of them, I'll try to go over them, briefly, each. So let's start from top going down. There's this kind of sperm-like creature with little red frills. I imagine this being very, what is it? Actually, for a lot of these, I imagine them being very almost microbial, kind of. And so this one I would probably see as some kind of worm, and I see that it opens up. So, but it doesn't feel like it would be a very good way to feed. So I believe because of its structure, unless it really wound back and but even then it has that, what is it, rigid base. I kind of imagine that actually more like a dome of protection to protect it as it moves through the water, or and it opens that up maybe with probably how it eats or whatever is by on little creatures or whatever, it stabs them with something and kind of sucks the nutrients out of them.
Sure.
With a little stinger inside of that mouth. The next one, Mr. Potato Head, but very deceased. Because the body is so diseased, and there's this very healthy little thing on top of it. Kind of reminds me. It makes me think of a cordyceps fungus. That has weaved through it. You got almost kind of wormholes in the potato. And those little arms, I'd say, are the original host creature, but all of the little kind of points, green points inside of it going to the outside, are connected to that base, and that large spiky ball at the top is the spore, and that's going to pop off and head down and make many more Mr. Potato Heads very sad. The next one. The next one kind of looks almost fungal, probably because there's a mushroom top being used as this thing, but yeah, I kind of imagine that. I actually imagine it being very much like a regular fungus. Those little hooks or whatever might be part of its. Maybe when a creature comes near it, if it's very small, it'll stab into it, and so there'll be dead insects or whatever that will that will fertilize the soil for its growth. Then there's the kind of large bloated toad-like creature. because there's no mouth, I get the impression that that these things are, what is it, not meant to last long, and their reproduction is probably related to their death. The fun way to say it is they crawl onto you and explode, but they could also do things like crawl to places and die to spread more of themselves, or basically it's going to open up on you and you're going to get poisoned or exploded upon or whatever, and it's not going to be very fun. In part because it's so bloated and it's toad-like. Maybe it has like a frog-like belch, where it'll like balloon out before it puffs up, as it puffs up and blows you up. Maybe with a really distinctive croak sound. Then there's the crab. Then there's the crab flower. And I see almost like kind of like carrot shavings, kind of making its kind of a, what is it, tail. Yeah, and also the crab. I don't know if that's the crab itself, but it looks like it has little bits of script on it. This flower in the crab. Well, that kind of bush extending down from the crab. Maybe. Actually, this one is giving me a surprising a lot of trouble. Maybe it's just the dissonance between the aquatic and above ground elements, but it almost kind of feels to me like the flower is very decorative. Like with the other ones, I've always been talking about lures and stuff like that. But maybe this crab just has a flower growing on it, and that's a unique, nice, interesting thing. I'd probably say that about the lime mite too. Maybe the flower crab. I could see that as like a little what is it? A little novelty pet for people. The lime tick. Oh, that's a pun, isn't it? Bellamy. Lyme tick? Like Lyme disease tick.
Oh, that's not a thing I had in mind for it at all.
That,
Very funny.
Sorry, but I really can't divorce it from that pun. That's clearly a tick. I've had enough ticks to know. And the last one, it's a little hard to see because of the colors.
I can zoom in once.
Yeah, can you zoom in on the blue one?
Yeah.
Oh, so that's actually geometric at the top of its head. Or was it, not fractal. Not geometric. Yeah, so for this one, the head is the head looks very weird and almost gemmy, and maybe that's like its shell, kind of like a hermit crab, and what's coming down is the little, and what also makes me think that is there's a little bit of like a fin too, so maybe that's like coming out the other side, so maybe that's like a bead kind of on it. But it looks like it's separated into two things, and so I kind of get if you've ever seen the split tail mermaid, like the Melicenes, like it can open up like that. It can open up like that. I think it'd be very small. So what's going to be threatening is like what is it? Krill and little sea stuff, and it's going to strike very fast with those spined halves of its body like whips, and then maybe if it's threatened, it retreats into the bead, kind of.
Okay, I think a thing I'm realizing is I need to have something for scale here, because a lot of these are a lot larger than are initially thought it would appear. But so the sort of design process behind this was, I wanted to sort of, this is intended, so what I wanted to create was a series of creatures that look like they could be thrown, or have components that would make them beneficial to be thrown either because they're sharp, or they're heavy, or they're pointed. And I want the creature in the center to be sort of the beast that flings them. And almost like a Pikmin kind of deal. In that it goes to find like lesser fauna around it and just picks them up and just flings them into the battle, as it were.
Oh, I like that so much.
And on the subject of the center figure, just the menagerie slinger, the reason why it has the flower head, in addition to just being a fun design motif, is that to protect itself from harm periodically, while it lets its little goons kind of do its bidding for it, it will burrow itself in the ground to protect its sort of its like damageable body from danger, and leave it so that it just has the leaves and the stem and the flowers above ground.
Yeah, there's a lot of there's like a lot of fake enemies in games that will have the flower and then it pops up and whacks you or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's like a trope. But I love the idea of the crab being the slinger, because if you've ever seen, like, crab movements are so lazy. You know, yeah, they can be fast, but like their coil back in is so relaxed and like kind of like a pawing kind of motion. So it's just like
yeah. So the way I wanted to try and suggest that was have two of the legs of the crab being upturned as if they're going to sort of scoop something up and hurl it. To contrast with the four legs that are intended to serve as like the standing limbs. And you inhaled.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Oh. And yeah, so the main design motif for these is not necessarily having a distinct sort of like idea in mind. Like, this is very much I wanted to do form over mechanics in terms of designs. Like, obviously I have sort of rough ideas for what these would all do in battle, or just when encountered in the environment. But I wanted them all to look like they could be thrown and have an impact upon being thrown.
Might I ask what the lime tick does?
So what I'm imagining that it would do is that it would it is, I suppose, kind of tick-like in that upon being thrown, the point would sort of dig in a little bit, and you would be weighed down and have sort of it passively siphon things into its roots. So it's kind of tick-like in that regard.
That is the worst unintentional pun.
It's very funny. And I definitely saw it and I said the colors and the shapes are great for this, and left it at that. That's so funny. But yeah, so this I think would be sort of a low to mid tier threat, and that it has things. It's not nearly as contrasting it with the Bellowing Rally Beast. This is no Rally Beast here. This is more of an introductory sort of major encounter than something that would potentially wipe a party.
All right, on to the next one. Yeah, last one.
Last one. This one I think is just the most. This one might be the best composition I've made. Just.
Oh yeah, this one you posted, and it's a full scene too, which gives a lot to talk about. Yeah, and of course, human heads stay intact, right?
Head gone.
Yep.
With a mineral.
So. Yeah, this here has a story to it because of the way these two figures are done. And this crystal-headed human has walked up here, but this thing is also poised as if sneaking up. And so I could either interpret it two ways. Either it's just come to pay its respects in some regards, or this, depressed crystal-headed woman is about to be attacked by this. And has kind of just gone off. I imagine that the crystal-headed woman is probably from... It does feel very human-like in motion and action, especially coming up to this cliff. So I imagine that the crystal-headed woman is from a crystal-headed society. And maybe these head crystals are like are like a way of replacing the brain. Kind of maybe it's like some form of immortality, and this and you know the hill they're on and stuff like that does feel kind of with its what is it, like very nicely carved curves. It almost gives the impression that maybe, you know, humans, but this was artificially created, but like in the kind of sci-fi way of sci-fi architecture, where it looks like these very weird things that can never be produced by nature, but also seem very not something you would want to actually produce in themselves, like these weird curves and this weird lip and wave. The creature itself. So you have one lizard that is less colorful than the other one, and that less colorful lizard sprouts into this large flower with these pointing. Actually, I will say, I'll probably go to say that this is like, I'm leaning now towards attack more now that I see them all pointed towards her back. Even if it was called out here on friendly terms, maybe it's looking down at that back with its kind of, you know, strike things, and the creature. I do get the sense that even with you know, we've had a lot of ones which I assume were unintelligent but were very intelligent. This one to me feels intelligent, and it feels like maybe it's because of the way the head is, you know, so far producing that it can like really look around and do stuff, or maybe it's the weird body kind of reminds me of like something produced, you know, like these two were tied together, and so this is like a composite creature, but yeah, it definitely feels very intentional in action. So that's what I got the gist about. That's what my thoughts on the scenes are.
Okay. Interesting interpretations as always, but for me, the posture of the creature facing the back, these two are companions wandering through a very harsh environment. The craned neck is meant to sort of be mirrored in both figures, and that they're both kind of overlooking this dune off into the distance. These are companions who have nobody to trust but one another in this wild.
And so they're both kind of like, that gives me the idea that they're both like magical creations, like the crystal-headed woman and then this very bizarre chimera. You know, if you say they have no one to trust but each other, of course. And your world, they might be judged on completely different things that outcast them.
This is a completely mundane person here. They're not a magical construct. This is just a human. And their companion dragon. So the way that I've always represented dragons, by name at least, I've represented sort of draconic forms, but dragons always have 8 legs and a head that's either a seed, a sprout, or a full flower. I have another composition I did in which I have, I can actually pull that up now, for dragon hatchlings, which, what is... Yeah. In that, yeah, dragons always have 8 limbs and sort of seed or sprout heads. So these are sort of juvenile forms of things that will turn into this.
Give me a minute. Hey, give me a minute. All right. Yes, we're ending just right on time. You can finish up what you were saying.
Yeah, I wanted to depict these two as sort of a nomad with their companion familiar is going on perhaps a pilgrimage across the desert, or some kind of rite of passage.
Yeah, I now kind of see that its neck is craned down, and now that I see it, maybe because of the layer it's on, it's just looking down at kind of where her feet are, where there's, you know, an opening, you know, with its head. The neck kind of gives that impression that maybe it's curving out of the background, kind of, you know, if that makes sense. Yeah, so that's I like that scene.
Thank you.
It's
probably one of the favorites I've put together.
Yeah, I think it's a good thing to end on. Like for a back cover, this would be a good image. Like, you know, like it's like a snapshot of the kind of adventures.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that about covers a lot of my creative process, image selection, creature design philosophy. And thanks for having me on. This is great fun.
Yeah, I was glad to have you. It was very fun talking to you. We should, talk again sometime. Maybe not on stream. We should just chat on Discord. But I'm gonna find someone to raid at the end of the stream.
Certainly.
Do you have any suggestions?
For people?
Yeah.
We could go raid Prototype Anne. We could go raid Bug. Those are the only two. Or we could raid Honeydew. Those are the only people who are alive on my followed channels right now.
All right. I'm going to I actually see someone who is kind of in the mid range that'll probably raid. They could use extra views. Thank you for sticking with us, everyone who is thus far, and those in chat. It's
a really tough year for restaurants.
You've been a lovely audience.
So we're gonna help.
Yeah. So I'm gonna copy that name. Just yeah. Twitch is very strange to me. Host. And that concludes the stream. Enjoy Mia's Valorant. It's always been very funny to me.
Take care, everyone.